So the servers are down on Escape from Tarkov, but today I'm going to go through some of the things that you can do to boost yourself through and past a lot of other players that you're going to be coming up against either in PvP or PvE. All of this stuff pretty much works throughout all of the game modes. Of course, when you reset, when you restart, obviously on PvE there is already a flea market with differences in how it will work when the resetters reset their accounts to play the PvE game mode, but either way that shouldn't really matter. These always tend to work on the game. As of the release of this video, maybe prices change, but after like a couple of days I can almost guarantee they'll be back to the point where it'll be very, very good for you. But let's get into what you can do to make yourself either some rubles or get yourself ahead. So first things first, let's head on over to the hideout. Obviously, when you start the game, the hideout is level 1, or at least some of it isn't even leveled up at all. So you're going to have to build yourself some stations. But the key stations, what I wanted to talk about today, is to do with, you know, getting yourself the workbench, because the workbench has a ton, and I mean a ton, of very profitable, very lucrative starting crafts. These come in the form of this. This is the bundle of wires, which can be made so you can create a set of 8, and it requires 2 power cords. Now, because at the very beginning, you're finding that there are a ton, and I mean a ton of PCs on the beginning maps, things like Ground Zero, that sort of thing, and you're finding these just in your general raids, in toolboxes, whatever. They're very, very common. And so the actual price of a power cord is, at the moment on PvE, is 150k, okay? So it's 150k, let's say it's 300k to be able to create an 8-pack of wires, which, you know, is pretty decent, eight wires. But how much are the wires individually? So right now they're around about 50,000 rubles. Sometimes they go up to 70k and the wires are down at 90k, and it's really about supply and demand. But the often thing that I'm finding is that wires are about 50%, so you can make about 50% of the input cost that you're putting on the wires themselves. So in the early game, I'm constantly churning out these wires every single time that the reset, or at least the craft, finishes on there. And it's an hour and 50-minute craft, so it's often quite easy to do. And that's going to net you, you know, 50% input costs. And even sometimes you're finding that it's actually double or triple the price of what the input cost is. So it's very, very lucrative, especially in the early game. At the moment, we're in that stage where no one's really buying anything because it is very close to 1.0. We are literally on the day before the server shut down for the release of 1.0. So yeah, that is something that really does make a huge, huge benefit to your ruble stack. But another one is this. It is the power supply unit, which we can use, and a lot of these are level 1, so you only need workbench level 1. But the power supply unit is quite expensive, generally 330k, and the capacitors are, you make 6 of them and they're 55k rubles, something like that. Now, in the early game, lots of people aren't needing the power supply, so whilst this craft right now is not as profitable as the wires, for example, you can see that both of these can go up in price, and because you're making 6 of them, you often make money from just doing either of these 2 ones. But that's not going to make you a huge amount of money. One other thing is finding yourself damaged hard drives, which can create magnets, which is very, very usable. And often at the very beginning of either a wipe or something like that, magnets aren't really required at the very beginning stages of upgrading your hideout and stuff like that. It's more so in the end game where people are trying to craft up some of the end game stuff. So hard drives tend to be reduced in price compared to what they are right now, but you can profit off of doing this craft. It's also only 40 minutes. So a lot of this stuff is worth doing, and you can create them very, very quickly. You know, you're looking at about an hour, something like that, and it's just pure profit. So utilizing the hideout is very, very profitable. Something else is making corrugated hoses, because these are required on tons and tons of just general crafts, and so you can make money off of doing this. These are like 250k. The input cost is relatively high, but you're probably doubling or making about 1.5 times the amount that you're actually making. So 50% of the input cost to 2 times the input cost. It does take 3 hours, but obviously you're leveling up your crafting skill at the exact same time. So starting that early in the wipe is going to make you be well ahead when it comes to the crafting skill, which actually speeds up all of your actual crafting items and stuff like that. So another one for you guys is the moonshine to vodka. So moonshine can be found in relaxation rooms, so you can do that pretty easily. So you can find that pretty much straight away for free on streets. And then you convert it into vodka, and then the vodka is often like 60k to 70k rubles. And the moonshine typically is sat at like 390k, and vodkas were usually up at about 60k at the beginning of a wipe, so you can profit from this. But once again, it's one to check at the time, because these are used I believe in the thick case barter, so for the actual thick items case and stuff like that. Same with Jack Daniels, you can check all of these prices and figure that out for yourself. But utilizing hideout crafts, especially the early game ones, can be very, very lucrative indeed. And whilst I haven't gone over every single one of them, you get the idea. Definitely check some of these ones, because they made me probably tens, if not 100 million rubles in the beginning of PvE, just by simply continuously doing that every time I logged on to the game. Another thing, this is probably one of the biggest money-making methods. However, it does take a little bit of time into the actual wipe to get going at a proper rate. So you do need to level up your traders, but you do not need the max for a lot of these. So first things first is Therapist. So Therapist unlocks the item case, which is very, very needed, basically. And in the beginning, you're needing somewhere to stick items, because stash space becomes a real problem, especially when you can't get a thick items case. It's not available on the flea or anything like that, like it is in the softcore changes right now. And so items case is very, very important to get yourself actually in the game. Now, whether or not you decide that you have enough money to buy yourself ophthalmoscopes and the meds in order to do this barter trade for the items case, it doesn't really matter, because either you can farm labs to get these to do the initial one, and then you create the barter, and then you can actually list the items case on the flea. Now, currently, all of the containers and stuff like that are really down in price, because no one's buying them, because they're going to reset their accounts tomorrow. So there's no point buying items cases or cases in general, or just any items. Even Mark's Room keys have halved in price, because no one's buying them, because they know that they're going to reset their account or not actually play the game anytime soon until the reset actually happens. So you can basically buy these ophthalmoscopes for 50k. They are always the minimum price. They never actually go above that. Maybe if this video gets tons of views, directly on release or whatever, they might be slightly inflated. But meds are also usually sat at around 20 to 30k rubles. And so you can buy basically 10 ophthalmoscopes for about 500k. And then the meds are usually costing you around about 700, 800k. So you're spending about 1.3 million doing the barter. Now, when PvE, for example, first released, this could be sold for 2.8 million rubles. So I was making 1.5 million rubles minus the flea commission tax, which is also something I want to talk about as well for later on down the line in this video. But you can essentially make 1 million rubles or something like that, or 800k or something, from something that it literally takes you no time at all. And the barter for it actually starts relatively early into the game. You don't need too much to be able to actually unlock it. That is, however, based on the fact that we have no idea how the story mode will go alongside the current task system in the game. So upon release, we'll figure it out and work out some of the things that we can do and optimize that. So if you want to stay tuned on figuring out how you can make yourself some money or save yourself some money, there'll be videos on the channel coming up. So make sure to subscribe if you enjoy that. But that is generally one way that I've made a lot of money. But there's another way. However, this one is a little bit further on down the line, but one to keep in note. It's actually probably going to be better, because when people see this video, they're probably not going to get to this point straight away, so they can't just farm it straight away and make money that way. But it is actually a barter that's unlocked at Jaeger loyalty level 3 or 4. I will put the link on the screen right now, or at least an image of what it actually is. But the sit case this is probably the most lucrative thing I've ever done on Tarkov in terms of traders. Now, that is because the sit case at the moment, for example, it's come down massively because no one's buying them, but they were consistently selling prior to like a couple of days ago, before like the whole 1.0 is so close. They were selling for about 4.8 to 5 million rubles, and on release, because no one is going to have these, they're going to be up in price, obviously. So the paracord is about 50k right now. The duct tape, you know, you're sitting at like 20k, like they're not really worth anything, and they're not really required for a lot of hideout items. Tape is required for a lot of stuff, and nails are required for a lot of stuff. But at the same time, if you're spending, say, 50k on each one of the tape and the nails, that would be 750k per one, so 1.5 million in total. The paracord, you're spending about 600k, so that would be 2.1 million. And then you've got about, let's say duct tape is 30k, for example, so that would be 450k. So you're spending about 2.5 million rubles on completing the sit case. But I was selling them at the beginning of PVE for about 7 million rubles or something like that, 8 million rubles. So I was making millions of rubles simply just doing the sit case barter. So covering all of my costs, covering absolutely everything once I achieved the ability to actually unlock the sit case barter. So this is the best thing for making money when I was doing it at the time, and of course at the beginning of PvE, as well as on PvP. It works perfectly fine as well. The barters are a really, really good way of making money. Another thing, weapons cases. Now, the weapons case from Mechanic is actually the better one out of the two. The Jaeger one usually isn't actually profitable, but the one I'm on about is this one right here. Now, weapons case prices are completely like busted right now because cases are in marked rooms, which I assume will not be the case, no pun intended, when the actual 1.0 release happens, because I assume that they want you to buy the cases from the traders. But the weapon case barter here is 8 motors, 15 wires, broken LCD, and an Acer. Acers are usually like minimum price. They're never really used for a whole lot in the barters, so they never really go up too much. And then you've got all of the other things. Now, typically, this is very, very cheap to do. The motors are the most expensive thing, and that's just because they're used in the hideout. But even still, basically everything's really high because you can buy everything off of and use them to upgrade your hideout right now, which we have no idea is going to be the case. But it was the case at the beginning of PvE, and this worked perfectly fine. But weapons cases were about 4 million rubles at the time of when I was doing this barter. Because, you know, people wanted them, and the reset for PvE is going to do the exact same. Everyone needs this sort of stuff again, and weapons cases go into the thick weapons case barter at the end as well. So, yeah, basically really, really good way of making yourself some money, because the total cost, it doesn't really take a huge amount of cost. It's like maybe 2 million rubles, something like that. At the moment, like the motors are just exceedingly expensive because of the hideout upgrades that we've currently got, and less people playing and more demand for hideout items. It's kind of screwing it over, whereas when the actual full release comes out, more players playing again and more supply, and, you know, because it's spaced further up into like the end game where you need lots of motors, etc., for your hideout upgrades. Yeah, it's kind of a reverse right now. Less people playing and more in the end game. So yeah, all of the hideout upgrades at the late stages are very expensive, but another one to talk about. And then we move into just general weapons that you can do barters for. So lots of people, you know, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but essentially there are a ton of weapons that are available from traders that are going to give you certain components, and these certain components are very valuable. So what I would typically do is I would go on and I would find some valuable weapon components. They don't have to be majorly like important or anything like that, but essentially what we're looking for is this one right here. This is a really great example. This is the AK-74U or AKS-74U for an SGC-10. This comes with a waffle suppressor, however, and the waffle suppressor for this one is typically very expensive, 139k. Now, the price of the SG right now is 139k. So not only can you sell the waffle suppressor for the same price that you buy the radio transmitter here, or the wireless signal transmitter, but you also get the weapon, and some of the weapon components sell, and you can sell the base weapon. So this is like an instant buy it, sell the waffle suppressor, and then you get all of the components and the other stuff you can either sell, keep, or replace bits on yours, or you can sell the other components and make quite a bit of money. This is not just the only thing that I'm saying. There are a ton of different weapons that you can do for barters that are in the game, and things that generally you can use to make money, just buying them with components, as well as also buying weapon components themselves. As you upgrade your hideout or your traders, you'll get access to more and more of the sort of weapon components that are worth quite a bit of money, and so you can find out which ones sell. And then what I do is I just add them to the wish list. So when I go into raids, if I find them, I'm gonna have it as a wish list, and it will show me, oh, that one's highlighted, that means it's a valuable weapon component. So I basically will be going on and using the wish list to wish list all of the high value weapon components, and it makes it super easy because, for example, let's go into our weapons right now, and I go on to the TRG and I wish list this one. So you'll see that the Boulder Pro now, when I inspect the weapon, has the wish list. So say that this is very expensive, it's really expensive item or whatever for, tasks like Gunsmith, which people will be wanting the weapon components for. I've wish listed it now. So if I go onto a PMC weapon that I've taken out in the raid and I double click, inspect it, and it says, oh, wish list. Okay, I can sell that. I'll take that piece off of that weapon and I'll sell that. And so that is basically one way to, make things easier for your raids. You can do this with basically any item in the game. So making sure that you've got a good wish list of items that either sell for a lot, or maybe things like weapon components that sell for a lot as well. I'd highly recommend doing that at the very beginning, right at the very beginning, and literally just wish listing all of those things. Especially if you're in a hardcore playthrough, this comes in super, super clutch, where, you're not actually able to use the flea, you're not using the flea, and it just makes it really easy to determine what's actually valuable on certain weapons, rather than like thinking you'll learn them as you go through. But at the same time, it's very, very valuable to do. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is inventory management, because this is something that is going to save you a lot of time. It's the time element. If you can save yourself like a couple minutes every single time after a raid, that's going to save you a lot of time overall. So if we can speed that up, we can get back into raids, we can progress our account, we can level up, and we can generally just succeed much better in our raids, or just progressing to where you want to get to, your tasks, etc. So what I usually do is basically create a blank space, and I surround it with all of the different cases that are important for general raids. So as you can see here, what I've got myself is we've got a items case. So obviously you can just replace this with another junk box, and usually at the very beginning I get 2 junk boxes. As soon as I reach a decent amount of money in PVE, obviously it's very easy to get money because you can just do super easy routes. But what I will do is essentially get myself 2 junk boxes. These are really good because we can store all of our valuables and hideout items in there, and just generally keep everything that we want. And then I get myself a med case, because having a med case is really nice. You just chuck in all the AFACs, IFACs, Calox, anything, splints, etc., serve kits, CMSs, and you just chuck them all in here. These are going to be like the ones that you use every single time. So you can see I got Propitols, ETGCs. I'd usually have SJ6s and mules, but I haven't got any at the moment. I've actually got them in my injectors. And so that is where I keep all of my usable stuff. Then I have one that I am going to sell, so things that I'm not going to use, and I just chuck them all into the other medical case. So this is where you'd put like trash stims that you just pick up to sell. And I have 2 of these. At the moment I've got 3, but that's just because we're in that stage where we have enough money to spend. So first one, get one just so you can have your own stuff. Second one is for selling stuff. I got a grenade box to obviously store a lot of grenades and save space. we have ourselves a magazine case so we can store our mags. These ones would usually be the ones that you're going to use consistently, so you only really need one at the beginning. And so yeah, you just stick in anything that is like good magazines into this so you can just quickly take them out. Then obviously I've got my ammo boxes. So ammo is obviously one of the hardest things to store, because even an ammo box is filled up very, very quickly once you start farming up the ammunition, especially if you're running labs ammunition farm. So you can type that into YouTube if you want the maximum ammunition farm for PVE, for example. I've done a video on it, which is going to save you a lot of ammunition. But we just stack in this all around this central location. So then we also get ourselves these thick cases. I've got key cases because we typically get less keys than everything else. And then we have weapons cases. So, you know, if I want to swap out a weapon or I've got to do a task, I have a weapons case down here. And then we have a food one just because, you know, maybe I should move this up to where this thing is. But that's just because we haven't got a lot of space in the stash right now, because it's just filled with loads of quest items and random junk, because I haven't been bothered to really focus on leveling or anything like that. We're just running what we have. But yeah, I would swap this around, and then we get the Holodnik thermal bag, which I just put in. Usually it's like items that I am actually going to drink or eat or whatever, just to save space. At the moment, it's just valuable things usually and random trash. But that is what I do to kind of save space. Obviously, doing this is going to save you a lot of time. So when I come into my backpack, for example, I just literally do this, and I'm going to drop that out, and then we put that into like our key case or whatever. The rubles go into our money case, which is typically higher up, but I moved them just because I needed to move them around. In fact, yeah, so they're all down here. And then, yeah, we would drop in our Vaseline into the med case, that into there. And then, yeah, anything else just goes into their respective thing, magazines. And then gear I'd usually leave my gear at the very bottom of my stash. So weapons and gear that I've saved up, armors, that sort of stuff goes in the bottom, because obviously you can search on your body armor to get any of the weapons and components that way, rather than, you know, having to go down into your stash to actually find them. And that is literally it. That's all I do for inventory management. You don't have to worry about it too much. Like, there's no point in stressing about your inventory or your stash management too much. Just do it how you can. Now, there's going to be the final thing for this video. It's probably going to be very controversial to a lot of people, but it is actually something that I will personally be doing in order to try and get myself ahead. Not only because it's going to give me some of the best hideout items in the game, should it remain in the game at 1.0, this is the plan, but it is the labyrinth. This is not only because this is actually unlocked at level 15. Once you get level 15, you have access at the moment to be able to go into the labyrinth. It could all change, and they said that they're doing balancing changes to the task, but they said primarily it will be left alone. Whether we actually have tasks straight away on release, I don't know. So this is just the plan so far. But either way, the labyrinth. Now, obviously getting to the labyrinth does require doing the quest, but at level 15, it's pretty damn easy to get to level 15. It doesn't take a huge amount of time, and, you know, you're generally just going to get there quite, like, within like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on how much you play it. It's not too difficult to get there. For me, I'd probably do that in a day or something like that. But obviously it's down to how much you play. But either way, getting to level 15, once I've done level 15, I will then farm labs. So labs is in order to get myself the ammunition that I need, provided that it still has the good ammunition. So labs residential unit is completely free, so getting myself a labs card is going to be able to allow me to go into labs to farm up the ammunition I need. And once I've got the ammunition I need, which is, you know, level 5 or level 6 pen, so we can go through Tigilla and Killer in the labyrinth, we are then able to farm the bosses. Now, there's two reasons why I'm doing this. Not only because we are going to get all of the items, which include military power filters, intel folders, you know, grenades, launcher ammo. We've got all sorts of things that are going to be within the labyrinth that are like the top tier pinnacle stuff, defibs, all of this sort of stuff, very, very expensive. but it's also the fact that we're taking out 2 bosses. And because we're taking out 2 bosses, as well as essentially guards, or, you know, Tigular and Killer's guards that do come along, these are very, very valuable because this is going to give us XP, and XP is hard to come by in the early levels. However, with combat XP, typically it is like very useful at the very beginning. So, you know, if you take out a boss at the very beginning of your PvE playthrough, you get, you know, 15k XP, let's say. At the very beginning, you'll get 15 for killing a boss and some guards or whatever. Well, that could be an entire level at the very beginning. So at level 15, you know, that might be something like 30k is required to level up, 40k, something like that, and it becomes more and more and more as you go. As you get to like level 60, it's hundreds of thousands of XP to level up. I know because I got there. But at the same time, what we do with this is we get to level 15, we spam out the labyrinth with the ammunition and the weapons that we get from labs, and then once we've actually done that, we can then push forward and get our levels boosted up in that labyrinth because we're taking out 2 bosses. And typically a labyrinth run will net you anywhere from about 32,000 XP to around 40,000 XP for taking out both of the bosses, which, provided that you take it a bit slower and you let the bosses push into you, you can just pre-aim the door and or the entrance where they're going to come from once you've aggroed them. So I just take in a nade, lob a nade. Typically you'll hear them, and you can hear them with their heavy breathing. They'll come towards you, and you just nail them in the head if possible with good ammunition, which we'll have got once again from labs. And so after that, we can basically take them out very, very easily. You know, you can use 5.56, but preferably 7.62 or anything like that is going to be very, very good, as long as you got like tier 6 or tier 5 at very least, ideally tier 6 pen ammo, and then we can just farm the hideout items in there, and it's going to allow me to upgrade all of those expensive things, the military power filters, all of those. Yeah, going to be very, very nice to have access to straight away. So when it comes to getting our hideout leveled up in the end, we're going to have all of that stuff without having to pay, you know, 2 million, 3 million for a power filter or something ridiculous. So yeah, a really good early farm. It does require you to have to not be afraid of the bosses. If you're brand new to PvE, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because obviously they are like the more pinnacle bosses than bosses themselves. But if you have played PvE for a while, or you've done the labyrinth, you guys know what I'm on about. Once you understand the mechanics of the labyrinth, it's very, very good and profitable, and you can make millions and millions of rubles from every single one of the raids, plus you're getting a lot of XP. The XP and all of that is the reason why I'm suggesting doing it if you have the ability to do it. So that is something to note as well. But generally, running labs is a very, very good idea because I've been spamming this through this video. But labs is one of the best areas because not only do you come into contact with raiders and PMCs, which are going to give you the most XP for like common AI mobs that you'll see, but you're also getting like the most valuable stuff. You can run labs for completely free, as well as if the residential room is still in the game. We have no idea what's going to happen with 1.0, whether they're going to balance it and rebalance it or whatever and nerf everything in there. But at the same time, it's just a really good run, and that's going to net you some valuable spawns. There's a key that spawns every single time in there that's going to open a room which gives you intel folders, bitcoins, and rare valuables, as well as rare posters as well that you can get, and just generally very good loot that you can sell to therapists for free, and stims out the wazoo. So you literally have never got an issue with stims at all ever. And then you can buy yourself a black key card, and then you can get yourself into black room for LEDXs and that sort of stuff at the same time. So you can just run that repeatedly for a bit of money. You know, you can do 5 raids in a row. You're going to net probably like 10 million rubles or something like that from those 5 raids. But generally a really good starting run as well. So those are the things that I'm going to be doing. I'm not saying you have to do them, but these have been the things that have worked for me over the entirety of both PvP when I was playing like as a main game before PvE came out, and then also on PvE. I've been doing this like from the very beginning, and it's prior to resetting my account all the way back, I had like 2 billion rubles and like 2.8 8 billion in stash value or something ridiculous. And I literally didn't really spend too long in the actual flea market itself. I was just doing barter trades and generally running the content that gives you the most money and also gives you the most XP. So hopefully that helps you out. If it does, make sure to like the video and of course subscribe. And I wish you all of the best with the release of 1.0. I cannot wait. I cannot stress how much I'm looking forward to trying out the whole story mode and trying to actually escape Tarkov. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one, which will probably be a 1.0 video. Yes, I can't wait. Goodbye.